Hey everybody, I knew that I would eventually have to do a video on why it's necessary in the Christian tradition to think of God in the masculine after I did my last video, which is called Progressive Christianity, A Critique from Within. And I would strongly encourage you to go watch that video first so I don't have to reiterate a lot of things. That said, the nature of the video, what I was talking about was that there have been in recent years these developments within progressive Christianity where people want to do things like refer to God with they them, the Christian God with they them pronouns, and say that Jesus was non-binary and call Jesus transgender and all of these things, and have all of these really asinine reasons for going after that, taking that perspective. And I knew that I was going to have to do a video talking about why it was necessary to refer to God in the patriarchal within Christianity. And so I was, of course, prompted to do that by a comment I got from someone named Red and Blue 323, who said, I have to ask, in what sense is God male? Does God have male parts? If you start giving qualities to God, he's no longer the ultimate. Being male is the result of having certain qualities and not others. If you make God male, you are limiting him in some sense. Ask yourself, why is God portrayed as a father figure by the biblical writers? Is it because they objectively recorded the facts about God? Or is it because the cultures that produced the Bible were patriarchal and male authority driven, and they naturally assumed God would be the same way? I'm very surprised you identify as a progressive Christian, because the ideas you espouse here are much more like something you would hear from a very conservative Catholic. Okay, so first of all, as I said before, I have my reasons for identifying as a progressive Christian, namely, outstanding among them that the human body has a number of phallically penetratable orifices, and I do not wish to be limited to just one of them, to say nothing of being limited to just one person with them. So for that and a number of other reasons, it's more conducive, my lifestyle is more conducive to progressive Christianity. Now, I have a lot of reasons for identifying with progressive Christianity that are not tongue-in-cheek, but suffice it to say that whether I was a progressive Christian or a conservative Christian, I would be critiquing from within. I have a fundamental contrarian element to me, and none of my values fully align with either side. That said, within the greater construct of the kind of person that I am, I would rather be critiquing from within progressive Christianity than critiquing from within conservative Christianity. So, first of all, in what sense you wanted to know in what sense is God male? Well, within the Bible, God is portrayed as having not just as fulfilling male roles within relationships, but with fulfilling fatherly roles within relationships. So, the most outstanding of those would be God's role in creating Jesus Christ. God takes on the masculine role. He takes on the masculine role in place of Joseph and impregnates Mary. Now, if there was supposed to be a matriarchal interpretation of that, then you might see something like God taking Joseph's sperm and fashioning Jesus out of it, or if there was to be a quote-unquote gender-neutral or non-binary concept of that, you might see God taking the sperm and the egg and merging them together independently of the two, all of these different ways of the Immaculate Conception. Now, the other thing you're forgetting is that in the Christian tradition, we are called upon to believe that that actually happened. So that right there, if we go with the assumption as Christians, we would believe that actually happened. So that would mean that God literally did take on a masculine role within within the creation, or I should say a fatherly role within the creation of, physically fatherly role, the inseminating role within the creation of Jesus Christ. So right there, yes, we do see examples of God's gender, quote unquote, not just being arbitrary. Now, the thing is, you are correct to say that, in a sense, that God is not literally male or female, that yes, God does exist above and beyond mere human concepts of existence. But it is a vital part of Christianity that we refer to God in the masculine, and not only in the masculine but in the patriarchal. Now, what I'm going to say here, it comes with a disclaimer. I am not saying anything about the actual gender roles of men and women within society. There are women who are capable of being aggressive go-getters in society, and men who are capable of being passive nurturers within society. All across the board, the human animal is wildly multivariant at the individual level, and I'm certainly not saying anything about what men and women have to do. What I do want to talk about is our archetypal understandings of masculinity and femininity. These do not come from nowhere, and the phrasing of your question suggests that you want me to arrive at the conclusion that this was some sort of, that just this male authoritarianism emerged out of nowhere and out of nothing, and just that male authoritarianism and female authoritarianism or gender neutral authoritarianism, that these are somehow fundamentally interchangeable, and we could just as easily start over human history with matriarchal civilizations and arrive at the same point we're at now, and that sort of thing. The history of the human race is a very violent, a very brutal, a very ugly history of people being really, really, really shitty to each other. And there is among some people out there, some groups of people, there's this notion that it's all based around overly rigid adherence to masculinity and patriarchy, etc., all of this stuff. So here's the thing, and this is why I offered the disclaimer I'm about to offer. That attitude comes from a very short-sighted understanding of the development of human morality and the development of human history. It would not have been, we all want to tell ourselves that if we were alive 4,000 years ago, we would have the same views we have today on race relations, on gender relations, on gender identity, on sexual orientation, on democracy, on the economy, all of these things. We would be the very same people we are today if we were alive back then. It's kind of like Jordan Peterson made the point that, so many people want to say that if they were alive in Germany during World War II, they would have been fighting with the resistance. It's like, no, more than likely, if you were a German during World War II, you would have been a Nazi or sympathetic to the Nazis. That's what played out in history. And the reality is that your concept about, your attitude about what you call male authority-driven, presenting that in like a negative context or having a negative understanding of that, is a recent phenomenon that we as a species are only recently able to arrive at. Human morality is, the nature of human morality, or the nature of morality, I should say, is objective. That's why objective morality exists above and, God presents objective morality that exists above and beyond what is practiced in the time of the Bible. But we have not been able to, it has been a very, very long and very slow and steady process, a very slow and steady push towards human beings being able to embody the best possible version of human nature. It's taken thousands of years for us to get to this point. We have had to evolve in many, many, many different directions and many different ways that seem disparate and unrelated. But we've needed a number of technological advances, countless technological advances, countless philosophical advances, countless mathematical advances, countless spiritual advances, countless sociological and economic advances that have brought us to a world where this better, higher level of our human morality can be practiced. Here's the thing. If you were flashed back 4, 5, 6,000 years to the dawn of human civilization, if you were flashed back to that time period and your number one concern was equality among the sexes, or tolerance of of diverse gender identities, or even something as noble as fighting racism or anything like that. If those were any of your number one priorities, you were dead. Your life ended. The human morality was born first and foremost out of, we live in a violent, brutal world, and not just how we relate to each other. A violent, brutal world full of animal predators, diseases we don't even understand yet, natural disasters, and all sorts of things that are going to fucking kill us instantly. That was the world that that human consciousness came online in. Or I should say, the world in which human consciousness came online. And when our human consciousness came online, we had programmed within us the lizard brain, the amygdala, that had been programmed by thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and millions and billions of years of evolution. And up until the point of human consciousness, the development of human consciousness, everything, all of our information had been, everything we understood about the world was on a gut level survival, in a gut level survival mechanism level. And we see that in the wild today. We in lower animals and that sort of thing. We talk about what wonderful personalities our pets have and that sort of thing, but never stop to think that the reason our pets have those personalities is because we have provided for their creature comforts to such a degree that their primary role in their existence is developing their relationship with us. They don't have to think about all of those other requirements of survival anymore. Anyway, what I'm getting at with that is that we came online with whether you want to say that God brought us online, or some of our primitive ancestors found a giant black obelisk sitting in the middle of the wilderness somewhere and started throwing bones at it, or whatever happened, we eventually came online. We became conscious as human beings, and we came online with our base level programming, our operating system, what Carl Jung would call the collective unconscious, that was built around survival. And it was an automatic, impulse-driven form of knowledge that drove us to act in certain ways and drove us to prioritize specific things. And out of that came our archetypal understanding of how we related to notions of male and female. At our base level, we have collective unconscious notions that sees the feminine as being nurturing, as being the life-giving, nurturing force, and the masculine as being the brutal, violent, killing force. Now, between those two things, one of those things is naturally conducive to the thriving of life, and one of those things is not. That masculine archetype that we all have within us, and again, we're talking about psychology here, not hard and fast, rigid gender roles, and I keep emphasizing that. But that masculine archetype within all of us, that masculine archetype that we have to understand and reckon with, and that we all have a concept of what it means to be masculine. There are positive and negative, toxic and non-toxic versions of it. Fundamentally, we interpret the masculine as being violence, the capacity for force and the capacity for violence. And that force can be channeled in a positive way. It can be channeled as the protector, the entity that protects us and provides for us, and guides us, and that sort of thing. That violence can be channeled in that direction, as the hunter, as the protector, as all those things. But it can also go in another direction. It can go in the direction of might makes right. in the direction of murder and rape, in the direction of some men just want to watch the world burn. It can go in that direction too. And here's the thing. Fundamentally, what we are fundamentally as people is an entity that said that made a decision with its consciousness to say we can do better, we can aspire to the better, and that necessity, that decision to aspire to the better, was born out of the collective, our masculine archetype. I believe it was Sigmund Freud who said that, I could be wrong about this, but I think it was Sigmund Freud who said that civilization was born when the first civilization was born when one man insulted another man and the second man laughed instead of killing him. I'm butchering the quote, but the second man laughed instead of killing the first man. That was the birth of civilization. That was the birth of our evolving morality and our evolving concept of right and wrong. And that evolution had to occur within how we develop and harness and understand the masculine archetype. So that the Christian religion is built on that, because the Christian religion is not the faith. It's not a faith that's based on some kind of Mother Gaia earth worship, where we worship the earth for the resources that it provides and the life-giving and all of that. That's not it. It is a religion that says we are going to contend with aspiring to our higher selves. And at an archetypal level, we understand that aspiring to our higher selves happens within the masculine. And again, I want to emphasize, men and women have masculine and feminine characteristics, the animus and the anima and the animus and the animus and all of that. We both have the masculine and feminine within us. But it's the masculine, it's within the masculine that we have to fundamentally make that decision, to choose the higher ground, to choose to move in a higher direction, to move to make things better, to use the motive force of the fundamentally violent motive force of our existence to make things better rather than worse. And for that reason, it's fundamentally crucial that we interpret God as patriarchal, and specifically fatherly, that we interpret God as having fundamentally the archetypal, lizard brain archetypal male role of shaping how we exist in the world. And again, that goes back to the absolute most primitive human family units. At the beginning of our earliest civilizations, we thought of our hunter-gatherer civilizations. The men took the fathers took the male children and taught them how to hunt and taught them how to survive. And from that fundamental level, we began to understand how this violent aspect of our character needed to be channeled and developed. And so from there, it's crucial that we think of God in the masculine, that God is taking us, not that God is symbolic of a nurturing wilderness that provides for our every needs. In fact, that's very much what is being shown in the Garden of Eden, that God is ultimately what takes Adam and Eve out of that nurturing, lush garden and into the reality of the harsh world. So we have this, it's fundamentally bringing it back to our survival, the morality of our survival. Our survival is based on that fatherly figure that takes you out of the lush, nurturing garden world of the matriarchal and into the harsh and brutal realms of existence on this earth. And so, for that reason, if we want to develop as Christians, if we want to develop, and which should be as the most fundamental level way that we want to develop, we have to reckon with and develop the masculine within our nature. And we have to develop it within the masculine archetype, not by throwing out the masculine archetype and embracing the feminine archetype. We all have that within our nature. We all have to make that decision to rise up and do better. Now, as I say that, again, I want to emphasize, this is just how we kind of arrived at things as human beings, irrespective of irrespective of what would have been the ideal. Ideally, yes, in an ideal world, we in an ideal world, we incorporate the values of femininity. We examine femininity at an archetypal level. We incorporate the values of that femininity. We incorporate the reality of literal reality of literal women into the world and make them full and complete autonomous figures. But it's a longer walk to get to that point, because we have to develop. We have to develop by way of our survival mechanism, or we don't survive. So it's a constant process of saying, how do we reinterpret the survival mechanism as something that doesn't just cause us to survive, but allows us to thrive? And that process has taken generations, however many generations, thousands, if not millions of generations of human development to arrive at that point. Jordan Peterson had a great point about lower animals, that the subsentient animals think across generations. They think across generations. The generations, if each offspring represents an idea of how to live, the ones that survive and reproduce are the successful ideas, if you think about it that way. We have had to live and choose consistently to live in such a way as to acknowledge the potential for darkness within us, and choose to realize that the potential for darkness, the potential for good are born out of that same potential, and choose the good over and over again. We have had to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of years campaigning every single day for human beings to make those positive choices and those positive changes, to eventually arrive at the world we're at now, a world where we have the good values of saying that racism is wrong, that sexism is wrong, that war and genocide are wrong, fundamentally wrong things. All of these things, we had to work over time in little small stages to develop to a point where we could say these things, where we could entertain these ideas without instantly dying. And the masculine archetype of God within Christianity is emblematic of how sacred that process is, and how important that process is, and how psychologically that process does occur within the masculine component of our nature. So that would be why, to a certain extent, yes, you're right. But also, to a certain extent, that wasn't a bad thing. In fact, to an important extent, that wasn't a bad thing. We would like to think that it would be great if if the human race had always conducted itself the way we conduct ourselves now. But we never stop to think about what developments in human history had to happen in order for us to understand what we do now as being good. We have to think. So, by the same token, to a certain extent, human beings don't think across generations, but civilizations think across generations. So, for that reason, for that recognition of how we shape the motive force within us, we acknowledge God as being fatherly. And that's never going to truly sit well with people who value contemporary notions of egalitarianism above all else. But I think that that's really just representative of short-sightedness on their part, rather than a failing within the long-standing institutions of Christendom. So I know that's a lot to say and a lot to take in, but hopefully that makes some sense. It's, ultimately, the problem, as we're faced with, going back to what I was talking about in my video about the original video I made about critiquing from within progressive Christianity, talking about people who want to refer to God with they, them pronouns and a non-binary Jesus and all of this stuff. Okay, we're talking about progress and progressive Christianity. C.S. Lewis said something phenomenal that I love. He said, I love this quote. He said, "We all want progress, but if you've gone down the wrong road, progress means turning around, taking an about face, turning around and getting back on the right road. And in that case, the man who goes down the wrong road first is the man who turns back first, gets back on the right road first, is the most progressive." And I love that. That's absolutely true, because what happens is we've gotten to a point, and this is getting more back into a discussion of, rather than an anthropological discussion or a psychological discussion, an anthropological discussion. This is just getting into the state of modern civilization. Especially in America, we've gotten to a point where the left and the right are so incredibly divided that the very worst thing either side can do is appear to be the other side. If you're a liberal, the worst thing you can do is appear to be conservative. If you're a conservative, the worst thing you can do is appear to be liberal. And so basically, it's kind of like the liberals think if they ever say no to anything, they'll never get to say yes to anything ever again. And the conservatives think if they ever say yes to anything, they'll never get to say no to anything ever again. That both of those states are fundamentally irrational. So when I talk about being progressive, I'm not talking about progressive within the current dichotomy where you have to choose batshit crazy on the left or batshit crazy on the right. I'm talking about that larger ethos towards wanting to make things better, towards wanting to avoid entropy and stagnation and all of that, and wanting to constantly be thinking, is there a way to make society better, now, and make the world better? Now, that does not mean that we have to adopt every new idea. And the problem within progressive Christianity is that they've decided that every new idea that comes down the pipe, they have to turn into a facet of Christianity. They have to throw open the ideological doors of the church the same way Annie Sprinkle would throw open her legs when she would visit adult movie theaters in the 70s and just welcome every single person in and every single idea in without discernment, without thought, without consideration of why this idea is being presented. A great historical example of that is the way that, if you go back 100 or so years, eugenics was considered the hot new progressive liberal thing. What would have been called progressive voices at the time, liberals at the time, were talking about eugenics as being this great, wonderful thing. And G.K. Chesterton was the only person, one of the few public intellectuals at the time who stood up against it. And at the time, he was branded as a conservative and a reactionary, blah, 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 all of this stuff. Well, what happened was a little thing called World War II. And when World War II happened and the Axis powers, Germany and Japan and that sort of thing, started trying to inflict the brutal, horrible reality of eugenics onto their populations, we saw very quickly, oh shit, eugenics is not the right side of history. This is not the good thing to do. G.K. Chesterton was the most progressive person in that particular discussion because he turned around and got back on the right road first, averting, in a way, if we had gone his way, we would have averted disaster. So, consequently, this problem we're having within the progressive church, the problem that we're having is that any time some new group comes forward with some new idea, the progressive church throws open its doors the same way Annie Sprinkle threw open her legs in adult movie theaters in the 70s. I know that I already said that, but hopefully the imagery will continue to resonate with you. Anyway, The point being, it just throws open its doors and says, "Oh yes, whatever it is, come in, come on in, come on in," and they take no consideration for the fact that the people presenting them with presenting these new progressive ideas are the very people that are trying to destroy the edifice of the Christian church. The very people that are trying to tear it apart. I talked about the gender identity bullshit within progressive Christianity. There's all kinds of other things you can look into. For example, like the breakup with white Jesus movement. The idea that that Jesus viewing Jesus as white or anything like that is actually indicative of racism on your part, and it was a long-standing racist tradition within Christianity, and people will take it even further and to say that Christianity was fundamentally racist and that sort of thing. And what you have is progressive Christians welcoming these notions in to the point that they are entertaining ideas that work to the detriment of the existence of Christianity. The same thing is true with the gender identity Christianity thing. When you start entertaining progressive ideas about gender identity within Christianity, you don't work to the betterment of Christianity, you work to the detriment of Christianity. And that's the problem. No one stops to say, how is this making Christianity better? Instead it's just empty, hollow virtue signaling. Look how forward-thinking and progressive we are. If you stopped and asked any single one of us why this is better, none of us would be able to tell you. But we've taken it on because we're so forward-thinking and so progressive that we never stop to think about anything that we're allowing into our midst, even if it is the very snake from the garden himself. We welcome everything in, even if it's the devil himself coming in and saying he wants to rewrite the liturgy. And the reason I say that, the reason I point to that, is because the people who are wanting to rewrite Christian liturgy and Christian sacred texts and the Christian rites of worship and all of that, the people who are wanting to rewrite it with these progressive ideas about sexuality and gender identity, all the stuff, the non-binary Jesus and things like that, they're not doing that in any way that's going to make Christianity better. They're doing it in a way that's going to that aggrandizes their worldview and their worldview that would exist irrespective of Christianity. And so think about it this way. There's an episode of King of the Hill where Bobby gets involved with this Christian youth pastor that is into all kinds of Christian metal and Christian hard rock, and he sings in a Christian metal band and all this stuff, and he's kind of a obvious parody of people like Scott Stapp and that sort of thing. But there's really no spirituality to what he's doing. He's just an entertainer. There's no spirituality to it. And Hank says at one point, "Can't you tell you're not making Christianity better? You're making rock and roll worse." And that's a very good point. If you're a Christian youth pastor, your job is not your job is not making rock and roll music. It's furthering the agenda and the cause of Christianity within the youth. By the same token, if you point to these things of how does all of this stuff make Christianity better, usually you'll get some vague concept of like, oh, well, it makes more people feel like they're welcome. Yeah, but it makes those people feel like they're welcome at the cost of alienating the people that were already there. So it's a net loss to Christendom to do that. And so again, it comes back to this attitude. Now, believe it or not, I don't think that these toxic strains within gender identity and all of this, I don't think that it's the result of homosexuality. I don't think it's the result of the gay community or any of that, of those people wanting to be involved in Christianity at all. I think it's just the fact that we've had one generation after another of participation trophy kids raised by helicopter parents who grow up and realize that you can't get everything you want from the world by throwing a temper tantrum, and the only thing they know how to do is throw a louder temper tantrum. And consequently, they are of the belief that if if they go into a room and that room is not specifically designed to cater to their every whim and desire and need and personal affirmation every single minute that they're in that room, they think they're being mistreated in some way. It is a totally secular problem born largely out of bad parenting and by parents who were bad children themselves, and they grew up to be bad adults. And it's just it is a problem that we need. It's fundamentally realizing that when you walk into that sacred room, you are there to serve and commune with the sacred, not receive your personal affirmation. Not sit there and be told that you're the greatest fucking thing on the planet. And a lot of people regard that as oppressive. They regard that as reactionary and conservative because they are so deeply up their own asses that they think that the nanosecond they walk into a room and that room does not affirm them and pat them on the head and give them a lollipop and tell them they're perfect just the way they always are and they're the best, most important thing in the world. The nanosecond they don't get that, they think they are being mistreated. Because, as they say, when you've lived your whole life with privilege, equality feels like oppression. Good night.